Welcome to another episode of Pirkei Avot. We're about to start Mishna 18, and we dedicate this episode in memory of Levy and Moshe Esther and Levy, and also in memory of Shlomo ben Moshe Esther. Over to Michael.
Thank you very much, Moshe. So in this Mishnah we are introduced to Rabbi Nahorai, and this is an Aramaic word meaning shining light or luminary, like one who enlightens men or who makes every subject clear. This name seems to have been used as a pseudonym for several of the Chachomim, including Rab Elazar ben Arach, which we actually feel this could be attributed to. So let's see. Let's talk a little bit about Rab Elazar ben Arach, as we assume this to be. He was one of the pupils of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, in fact his favorite pupil. He was a brilliant, creative intellect, and his great teacher, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, described him as a spring that flows with ever-renewed vigor. Rabbi Yochanan regarded him as the most gifted of his 5 pupils that he mentioned in Avot chapter 2, between the Mishnah of 10 to 14. It talks about the 5 pupils, and a great future was predicted for him in by his Rav. But then after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai died, the other disciples decided to remain at Yavneh to continue their studying, but Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, who had now married, was convinced by his wife to move to her native city of Emmaus, which was a beautiful spa resort where many people flocked to probably for the good waters and other things there. But unfortunately it had no Beit HaMidrash, had no academy or kind of companionship for advanced Torah study, which Rab Elazar or Rab Nahorai was capable and used to. But he was a brilliant master of Torah, and he had no doubts that perhaps his colleagues and friends would follow him and make Emmaus, this new spa resort, a new center of the greatest Torah study potential in Israel. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had planted the roots of his academy in Yavneh, and the others remained. At a point, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach he wanted to return, to get back into his Torah studying with his fellow colleagues. His wife was a little bit tried to persuade him otherwise, and he stayed. So what happened when he returned? What was the consequence of him spending this time in Emmaus, away from this place of Torah? But first of all, you know what? Before we carry on, let's talk about his Mishnah. Let's go, because it makes more sense. Rabbi Nahorai Omer. Rabbi Nahorai said, "Have gole lemakom Torah, a journey to a place of Torah. Va'al ta'omar shehi tavo acharecha, and do not say that it will come after you. Shechaverecha yakumaya bayadcha v'al binatacha al tishan. For only your fellow students will make it remain with you, and do not rely on your own understanding." This is a quote from Mishle 3:5, King Solomon's word. Do not rely on your own understanding. So Rab Elazar ben Arach is saying, journey to a place of Torah, and don't think that it's going to follow you, just naturally going to follow you. So he's, as we learn in Pirkei Avot, a lot of these Pirkei Avot are reflections of their authors' lives and their authors' experiences. So perhaps he's reflecting on his commitment to live with his wife in Emmaus in Israel. It's a spa resort, and the consequences of taking yourself out of a place of study, and what the consequences will be, and what the pitfalls of doing something like this is. So what happens? So he, after spending time with his wife there, he decided to return to Yavne, and he was called to read a portion of the Torah aloud during morning prayers. And apparently, his colleagues were happy to give him this distinction and this honor, but when the actual words he read, he misread them because he was so unfamiliar with the Hebrew language, which is a crazy thing when you think about it, that you can lose so much so quickly. He should have read, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, this month shall be to you. And he amazingly pronounced, HaChoresh Haya Lavem, deafened were their hearts. So his colleagues, the other Chachomim, who were his close friends and fellow students, were shocked beyond words. They apparently, it was recorded that they prayed for him. They prayed for him very, very hard, and apparently, eventually, we learn in Shabbat 147b, his studying and his learning was restored. But it must have been a great shock to him as well. It must have been very embarrassing, because you don't know that you've lost something until you perhaps try to practice it again. And this must have been an agonizing experience. So he's saying, look, exile yourself to a place of Torah. This is important. If you're going to study Torah, make the effort to separate yourself from from distractions and various other things that will take your attention away. In fact, I mean, it sounds like it's a slight thing I'd like to mention, but I remember when I used to live in the suburbs in London, the suburbs, and when I moved to the central London, I remember my brother Danny, he said to me, Michael, be careful that you may become less religious when you go to the West End, because there's not much, it's not community there, and the shul is not close to your house. So be careful. And I remember, this was a few decades ago, I remember saying to him, don't worry. I said, it's up to you to decide if you stay religious or not. It's not, the circumstances won't change you if you want to stay that way. He said, no, you've got to be careful. And he was absolutely right. Because when I went to the West End, if things aren't close to you, you can end up making excuses why you're staying in bed, you're not going to go to shul that week, or you're this, that, and the other, and you do lose your Yiddishkeit slightly. And so it's correct. So you have to take yourself, if you want to become a Talmud Chacham, you have to put yourself in a yeshiva that is perhaps away from other places, that provides you with very, very few distractions, so you can concentrate. Even Avraham was commanded, and I quote, go out of your country and your birthplace and your father's house to the land which I will show you. We learn this in Bereshit 12:1. Obviously, Avraham's native environment was no setting in which he could develop a clear knowledge and worship of Hashem. We know about his father was the Terach, was the idol maker, so you couldn't get a worse environment. And so he was commanded by God, take yourself out your comfort zone and go exile yourself, so you can concentrate and you'll be shown a better life when you take the risk of of uprooting yourself from what you feel comfortable with. And Rav Chaim of Volodyin is so named because he built a yeshiva there, and it was the first such school in Lithuania. Volodyin, though a very small town, is barely larger than a village. It has no railroad, post office, or electricity. But Rav Chaim chose the town deliberately, for he wanted his students to immerse themselves completely, wholeheartedly in a world of Torah, without any distractions that you can find in the big city. So very, very true words by Rav Nehorai, who we suspect is Rav Elazar ben Arach. And so what does the Mishnah say? For only your fellow students will make it remain with you. We must understand that studying with fellow people, fellow students and colleagues are sometimes a spur for you to be a better person. When you are sparring with your chavusa, you're trying to find, potholes in each other's arguments, you continually advance yourself through others. So the continual study with other people to play yourself off is very important when you're studying, if you want to retain this sort of information. And regarding, he also says, and do not rely on your own understanding. So take advantage of the fact that you find yourself in a yeshiva or a place of study, or you find yourself in a mindset that you are able to toil for the Torah. We know that King Solomon said, if you seek the wisdom of the Torah like silver and search for it as hidden treasure, then you will understand reverence for Hashem and knowledge of Hashem. This is from Mishle 2, chapter 2, verses 4 and 5. So we have to toil, and we have to make an effort to understand, but don't rely on your own. You must take advantage of your fellow chavusas, take advantage of your teachers, and use this opportunity that you perhaps have for a certain time in your life to make the most of the fact that you're in a center of study. This is very important. And I think that concludes this Mishnah.
Thank you very much, Michael. And after that fascinating Mishnah about Rabbi Noah Wright, we're going to carry on next time we convene, and we're going to do Mishnah 19 with Rabbi Yanai. And until then, we wish you a wonderful and blessed week.